You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
Right up Meridian, baby.
All right, folks. Welcome back to Right Up Meridian. Scott here with you. I got Tony on the other line, as always. It's a bummer. End of the season. We knew it was coming. Thought we'd maybe get a gentleman's sweep. We didn't. We got a Celtics sweep. We're no better than the Cavs, unfortunately. No better than the Heat. But here we are. Pacers are out of the playoffs, and it's a sad day. Tony, how you doing, man? It's a bummer.
Bummer, sad day, but a hopeful day. You know, it's like,
yep.
It's obviously, you know, we didn't really think the Pacers were going to win this series, but you always have that hope that something crazy could happen, and really they kept that hope alive till basically the final seconds, in the series. Obviously, some things to clean up as a franchise, but in terms of the Celtics series, sad but hopeful about the future for this Pacers franchise.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with a series. We'll do a series recap, maybe a season recap, and then look at maybe some off-season stuff. The series. It's funny. I was at game 4. It was a great atmosphere. We don't get too deep into single game stuff. My stuff from that game is like, you were watching it. I was there. It did look relatively inadvertent, but there's been a lot of inadvertent stuff called an intentional foul or a flagrant foul. How Jaylen Brown's elbow to McConnell's head, because he went down hard. I mean, it was just the way that action hit. And I don't think it was intentional. I really don't. And like afterwards, Jaylen went up to McConnell and they kind of, did like, man, we're cool. Like didn't seem to be a lot of bad blood. It did seem to be a basketball incident. That said, to me, it met all the indications of a flagrant foul. And I wonder, Tony, Jaylen had a technical already on the book. So a flagrant, I think, would have kicked him out of the game. I wonder if that was in the head. It's just, that was one thing I'll point to game 4. That was a very bizarre call.
Didn't make a lot of sense. And it just, to me, it just spelled like, okay, let's say the roles are reversed there. That happens to Jaylen Brown and T.J. McConnell smokes him in the face. Like, that's a flagrant. And I don't think you see a lot of griping from the Pacers that, like, if they called that a flagrant. Like, yeah, they kept honing in on the – first of all, the explanation was laughable. Like, it was like, although unfortunate.
Right.
Yeah, like there's several pieces of criteria for a flagrant foul, like to where you could deem it a flagrant foul, and like they kept honing in on like the intent aspect. Right. Well, it's like that's not the only criteria there. Like I watched them call flagrant fouls all season on like closeouts, where a guy accidentally gets his foot under somebody. Like
that happened in game 3.
Yeah. So it's like, it didn't make a lot of sense, and it really was like that little time period there just kind of shifted the game. Like it was like McConnell blows a layup, they go down, hit a 3, then we're getting that offensive rebound. They don't call that flagrant, and then it was like the wheels just kind of fell off from there. But yeah, the call made no sense to me. The explanation made no sense for me. And then I saw Dustin was the pool reporter for the officials after the game and asked about that call, and they basically said the same thing again. So did not make much sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, But in the end, here's what I think about this as I look back on this series is, the Pacers, it's frustrating because you leave this and you're like, dude, we could be up 3-1. Like there's a real world where we could be up 3-1. I think game 1 is its own. We had a whole pod talking about that. That was a whole kind of blown game. But in reality, I don't leave this thinking like, damn, we missed an opportunity to be up 3-1, because in the end, definitely in games 3 and 4, but even in game 1, it came down to winning time, and you saw the Celtics ratchet up their intensity. They made all of the plays that had to be made. And, it's like one of my favorite sayings, it's not a bug, it's a feature. I mean, that is the feature of this Celtics team. Like, they're better. And so I don't think it's like, damn, you just let 3 slip away. I mean, I think in the end, the Celtics, hate to say it, they won all 3 of those games, and definitely 3 and 4. They made all of the plays. I think Pacers went like no points in the last 3 minutes in game 4.
Yeah.
So you don't, not here to give flowers to the Celtics, don't really care about it, but it is, I don't leave thinking like, damn, we missed an opportunity to go to the finals. I think what we did is we ran into a team that in the Celtics kind of sleepwalk through some stuff and kind of play to the level of their opponents. And they damn near got burned 3 times with the Pacers, but they were able to pull it out at the very end and they made the plays they had to.
100%. Yeah. And, we even talked about that in the Knicks series, that, we didn't really feel super comfortable when it came down to winning time, that the Pacers would be able to close. You think back to games 1 and 2 in New York, very similar situations, where the Pacers kind of pissed a couple away or the Knicks went and got it, depending on how you look at it. That Milwaukee series, I think back to game 3, the Pacers did everything possible to blow that thing. And, they kept getting offensive rebounds, fortunately, but it's just, they're a young team, for the most part, don't really have a shot creator. I do think that's where a Mathurin would have played a big factor, is he's a dude that can go get a bucket, kind of cold-blooded too, built for those kind of moments. But yeah, I'm with you. You could say the 3-1 thing, but it's I don't know. It could have been 3-1, yeah, if things broke your way, but they continue to not break your way for a reason as well. And it stinks. And I do think game 1 was just lingering the whole series.
I agree.
I think if the Pacers close that out, you have more confidence you can close them out. And instead it's all of a sudden you're just oh shit, what are we gonna do here? Or oh no, it's happening again. I do think that plays into your psychology.
No, I completely agree. And I think the Celtics are a team that when the pressure ratchets up, I think they could be broken, but they never really felt that pressure because they were never down in the series and never really facing an opportunity. They're facing possibly losing game 3, but it's all right, if they lose that, it's worst case, they're down 2-1. You go up 1-0 on them, and then that game, if you win game 1, lose game 2, and then game 3 is where it's at, suddenly that's a holy shit. If we lose this, we're down 2-1, and we're got to come back to this, madhouse in Gamebridge. Maybe things go a little bit differently, but I also don't know. It could have just been could have been a 5-game series. Some of the plays that were made, this is not a Celtics podcast, but goddamn, man, that Drew Holiday defensive stop against Nembhard in game 3 was so high level elite. His defense to make that play, he's kind of pushed off, but he turns around and gets at the ball without fouling. That is super high level. And I have nothing but blame for the effing Milwaukee Bucks for trade him out of our conference, please. You had him, great. We could have played you and Giannis with him, but you got rid, and then you added him to the Celtics. That is all the Bucks' fault. 100% the Bucks. That I blame them for that.
Yeah, and hats off to Brad Stevens, man. He built a monster there.
Yeah.
They had some nice pieces, obviously, when he moved to the front office, but acquiring Drew and Porzingis, who obviously they didn't even need in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's pretty impressive stuff. And those are and Derek White, those are the pieces that help you move the needle forward to win a championship.
So, yeah. And so we're there at the game 4. It ends. I've been to some Eastern Conference Finals games in the 90s. I went to some of the Pacers Magic series. I think the Pacers Knicks series the year before. I don't think I've never been at if I have, I don't remember. I've never been at a game that I remember where I see a series get closed out for a champion, an Eastern Conference championship. So it's the game ends and you have that moment where it's they was it Tatum misses a 3, somebody misses a shot and Holiday gets the rebound, passes it out, and it's oh that's it. You have that 3 seconds where it's this clock's still going. You're oh dude, it is over, and then they start celebrating crazy. And I'm just why? Oh, that's right. It's just it all hits you, and it's oh shit, they're gonna celebrate on our court. And then all of a sudden, they're not leaving, and I see them bring the table out with the trophies, and my son's I want to watch the trophy ceremony. I'm you don't, you don't. But I'm all right, we'll sit here for a little bit. And then it's all the fans are gone. It's all Celtics fans around us. They're chanting, "Let's go Celtics!" And I love my son because he's like, I at least want to see the Bob Cousy trophy, and I'm like, all right, man, like the fact that is pretty cool, but let's look at it and let's get the hell out of here, and we did. But I mean, it was something kind of unique, like I've never seen that before. So there was that, but that was a bummer. Anyway, a couple things, takeaways from the series. I'm going to ask you this. Was it a flash in the pan, or did we see Andrew Nembhard become a guy? Because you look at his numbers in the regular season, over 68 games, he's averaging 9.2 points a game on 7.7 field goal attempts, 3.8 made field goals. He's shooting 49% from the field. In the playoffs this year, he goes up, basically doubles his number of field goal attempts. Well, makes, but he goes from 7 to 10 in attempts, makes from basically 3 to 6. I'm rounding around here. But his field goal percentage goes up to 56%. When he's taking more shots in more pressure-packed games, he goes from 2.5 threes a game in the regular season to 3.5 3 attempts in the playoffs. His three-point shooting percentage goes from 35% to 48%. This is some games where he's shouldering way more load. 2 games without Haliburton that are in there that he played great. Even his rebounding numbers, his offensive rebounding goes from 0.5 to 1.5. His defensive rebounding goes from 1.5 to 2.5. I'll ask you this: did we see him become a dude, or is this just a 2-week flash in the pan?
Yeah, it's unique. I think he is a dude. I really do. Like that pressure he was under, but it's a unique situation because I think he kind of showcased himself as a dude when the ball was in his hands. And, with Tyrese Haliburton on the squad,
Yes.
the ball is just not going to be in his hands if they're starting together. Like, he's a primary playmaker as he showcased. So it's like, it's a weird conundrum of him kind of coming to be a dude here because he's more of a secondary piece in that starting lineup with Haliburton. But like, he obviously showcased like he's more than capable of running a team and kind of being a dude himself. So it's like, it's a weird thing that like got my mind thinking, the last couple days of like, what do they do with that situation? Because like, it's a little,
let's put, I want to get to that. Let's put a pin in that. And I'm going to make a note. We'll come back to that because I think there's a really good question about Nembhard for off-season stuff. So I hear you. Let's put a pin in that for now.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, ultimately to answer your question, I think he's legit.
Yeah.
He's risen to that occasion before too. Like I think back to his rookie season in that Lakers game where like he knocks down the shot. But then, I also think of like some times where it's like, all right, too much Nembhard, there were times in the playoffs where it was like, he kind of was trying to be that dude and like dribbled off his foot or whatever, so it's like, I think he had 2 really good games. But I do think he can develop into being a really, really damn good NBA basketball player.
Yep. I think the other person that really shone out on that second unit was T.J. McConnell, who just came in, was great. I was thinking about it like, dude, he just showed up in the playoffs. You look at his game splits, and actually it's similar to the regular season. And actually, he may even have shown out better in the regular season and the playoffs. I think he just comes in with such energy. In the Bucks series, he only had 2 games where he had more than 10 points. He games 2 through 5, he has a 6, 7, 8, 6 point totals. In the Knicks series, game 3, he only has 6 points. Game 5, he has 7. That was the reverse. Which blowout was that? That was the Knicks blowout of us. But even this series against the Celtics, he only has 9 in game 2. But he came in, looked awesome, and he also looks like a guy who, I wouldn't say he's a dude because he's like 31, 32 years old. Like, he kind of is what he is, but he showed that he really is a clutch playoff performer who can come in and just, he's the kind of guy you want to run your second unit, which is why I want to put a pin in it, because we'll get like, this is where it becomes tough. It's like, do you have a second unit point guard is really good too. But anyway, McConnell, I think, needs to be mentioned as well.
Yeah, dude, he was awesome and just like electric. I saw him walking off the floor doing the heart thing yesterday. Yep. Would be shocked if he woke up today and didn't have a humongous headache.
Kidding. Yeah.
like the way that he hit his head on the floor. I'm like, man, that looked like a concussion to me. But no, dude, he was so much fun. Like, I never I never lacked confidence when he came in the game. Like when he came in, whether it was for Tyrese or Nembhard or whatever, it's like, oh, all right, like we're gonna go on a run. Like,
Yep.
and that's really unique to have with a second unit guy, where you just have such confidence and a guy. It's so bizarre to look at his shot chart and like in how he scores at the rim because it's so unique. Like the way that he plays and the way that he can get to the rim and honestly, like at times looked unstoppable getting to the spots that he's comfortable shooting. Um, and he's a dude when the Pacers signed him, I'm like, please, like, I hope he never plays. Like, he's a emergency in case of emergency, like throw him in. And then like he's turned into one of my favorite players. And yeah, definitely showed out and have nothing but good things to say about, his performance.
This goes into a bit of the offseason. We'll continue to hold the offseason talk for a sec, but again, looking at what Siakam did in this series, he had a great series. He had a great playoff run. I was kind of looking at it like he scored over, 10 points a game in every playoff game. He scored almost over 20 in most of the playoff games. The last time he didn't score 20 was obviously this game. He scored 19. He had 14 in the Knicks series in game 4. And then, 19 in the first game. Like he's just kind of right around that 19 to 27. Had a couple, obviously the 2 first Bucks games were bananas. He again showed as a guy who really you could lean on. He could get some offense. It still looked like Toronto Siakam at times, and especially with Haliburton now, it looked like it was just, all right, he's going to go ISO and take his time to get there. I think this is where when we get a full offseason, a full training camp, we hopefully see a slightly different usage of Siakam, but he became pretty close to that guy. It's like, all right, we need to get a bucket, and you knew you could go to Siakam and get a pretty damn good shot out of him. So I think he definitely earned his max extension because I also just finally went back and looked like, all right, when was the last time he didn't score 10 points? And it was this season, but it was back on November 5th. He had 8 points in a overtime loss to San Antonio. Ever since that point, he's in double figures every single game, and he's played every single game. He's just a gamer, and he plays. And so, to me, it's like he did everything you wanted to see from a guy to get that extension, which, honestly, when we got him, I was excited, but I was also like, I'm kind of nervous about giving this guy a max extension. Now I'm not.
No, not at all. I mean, led us in points and rebounds in the playoffs. Had a 3.4 assist to turnover ratio, like very low turnover guy. Didn't foul a lot defensively. He was just everything you would want out of a guy that you traded for and are getting ready to max, right? And I mean, like I said, leading point and rebound guy on a team, taking him to the Eastern Conference Finals, like it's pretty impressive. And like you said, you could go to him when you needed a bucket. He's a tough matchup for a lot of different teams, and in the way that he scores, he's unique in that he's not really gonna go get a bucket from the 3-point line. Like he's still like kind of an old school guy in terms of like lives in the mid range. But JJ Redick was talking yesterday, like in the Celtics series, he was like 18 for 25 in the mid range. So it's like that's usually that's a low efficient shot, but like 18 for 25 is pretty damn efficient. Yeah. It's like 1.2 points per shot. So yeah, I mean, just everything you would have wanted out of him. I have no reservations about maxing him, even though it's going to be into like his mid to late 30s. To me, yeah, it's like, okay, if for whatever reason it stopped working out, it's a tradable piece for somebody that's looking for to get a couple. Like somebody in a rebuild might want to go get that contract.
Well, and he's a guy who I don't think, even if it starts to go bad, I think there's still going to be some skill there. I mean, it's not comparable. Like, Dirk was able to get his shot off for years and his athleticism went. Like, Siakam has a great mid-range game, and that's not going to go away. And he's tall and lanky. Right. He can get that shot off. Like, this is where, like, these are weird comps, like a Trae Young or a Kyrie Irving. Like, they're awesome. But once that athleticism is gone, like, what do you have there? Like, what's left? I don't feel that way with Siakam. Like, the production.
Derrick Rose.
Yeah, no, exactly. And some of these bigger guys. So it's weird because I feel like as I look around the league, there's a lot of guys. Like I think Jaylen Brown is another one. Like if he loses athleticism, he's not a great dribbler. Like what is there? I'm not as concerned about that with Siakam. And again, the thing is, it's like if you're Indy, you got to max somebody. Like, you can't just be like, hey, we're going to max Tyrese and just do a bunch of role players. Like, at some point, you need to max somebody else, and you don't just get to pick top of the litter. It's like, all right, well, hey, Luka looks pretty good. Let's go get him. Like, you just don't get to do those things if you're Indy. So at some point, you got to take somebody who is slightly imperfect and make it work. But I don't even think he's imperfect. I think he could actually work very well with this. So I'm like you. I'm totally cool giving him the full max.
Yep. No reservations for me on that.
And you and I are just podcasters. From what I've read and heard in the rumor mill, it seems very likely that he's going to re-sign, because Siakam does have the decision. He's unrestricted. He could go wherever he wants. It doesn't seem like that's one of the options. It seems like the option is he's going to sign here, because when he was traded, it did seem to, like, I think the Kings were making an offer for him, and his people let him know, like, well, I will not be re-signing with you guys. I wouldn't do that. It did seem like wherever he was going to go was going to be a place he at least had a very high likelihood of re-signing. So it does seem to me, at least, that I think he's going to re-sign. But I'm curious, do you have the same take from what you've heard and heard out there?
Yeah, I mean, all the national guys. Like, I even saw a report like yesterday or 2 days ago. It was like, unlike Pascal Siakam, it seems like OG Anunoby might take free agency very seriously. It may not end up back with the Knicks. And it was like basically saying, like, everybody thinks Pascal's going back to the Pacers. OG, it's not as likely, I guess, for him to go to the Knicks. But yeah, and like, part of this too is that I think people like may not see the bigger pictures. Like, these agents are in constant communication with executives and things, and if you burn a team like that, like, your time, like, those executives then all talk, like, your time as an agent, like, you're not going to be like lying to the patient, like, oh yeah, he'll resign. Yeah, just go ahead and trade for him. He'll resign, and then not resign. I think it's worth noting too, he and Andrew Nembhard share an agent, and so, like, I just think he has a really good relationship with the Pacers. It seemed like he really enjoyed his time here. Obviously, went on an Eastern Conference Finals run, especially in comparison to, like, that Toronto team was, like, in a bad spot.
Yeah.
Like, they so, like, going from that to this in the midst of a season, like, he saw some very low lows with them and some very high highs with the Pacers. Like, I see no world where he's not a Pacer next season.
Well, and just like the Pacers don't get their top pick of any free agent they want, if you're Pascal, like, if you want the max deal, not every team can offer you that. Like, if he goes out to free agency, it's like, all right, well, the Lakers don't have that spot. If you want to go, like, the Clippers don't have that spot. Like, the Celtics don't have that spot. And, like, we're not going to play that game. But I would say the list of teams that have a second max spot available is pretty slim. And, there's not a lot of other options. So it's like, do you want to go to Atlanta? Do you want to go to Washington? Or do you want to stay here and play in Indy? And so I think that's a real advantage here, is the Pacers have the max slot, and you're probably only competing with like 7 or 8 other teams. And I think Pascal knows that as well. And honestly, most of the teams that were competing for that max spot were competing for him when they traded for him. And he kind of pushed that around also. I think Sacramento has that spot. He doesn't want to go there. So I think that's the other side to look at it too, is it's not just like, well, Pascal can go out and get what he wants. Like, if he wants to get max money, then it no longer becomes a money discussion. It just becomes, who can offer that to you, and the list of teams that can gets short very quickly.
100%. And if it's he and OG are the top 2 guys in the market, most teams will probably go after OG before him, would be my, just based on age and, some versatility in lineups and stuff. And so, yeah, I don't see a world where that doesn't get inked pretty quickly, just based on all the tea leaves that are out there.
The other one to talk about, at least I want to talk about, and you can throw in any other people kind of recap. Again, if there's anything else from the Eastern Conference Finals you want to talk about, I'm kind of not over it, but it's just like they're a better team. Like, there's not much more to say. Like, we had a great run. I do get tired of the injury narrative when it's like, we are missing Mathurin, our 3rd or 4th best player. I mean, it's not everything. It's not nothing. Like, you can't have it both ways, where it's like the Pacers just got total injury luck, and then it's like Mathurin would have been really nice to have in some of these Celtics games. Maybe it makes a slight difference. I don't know.
Or having Haliburton.
Yeah. No, having Haliburton fully healthy. And he's the other one I want to talk about, because to me, his playoffs, his season, it really becomes kind of an incomplete grade. And here's what I mean by that is that he was electric when he was on. Beginning of the year, he was electric. He had a stretch there for like 3 or 4 weeks where it's like, holy shit, man, we got the best point guard in the NBA. And then he got hurt. And then it hasn't come back. And then he kind of got healthy. And then he had like a couple of flashes in the playoffs. One of the games against the Knicks, game 1 against the Celtics, I think was really a high-level performance. Then it all kind of fittered away. I think a lot of us are leaving this season wondering, all right, which one is it? And I know there's injury concerns, but like how much do you parse injury into this versus was he getting figured out? Was his style of play changing? Was he hitting a mental wall? Which also is like, that's normal, man. Like you see it, Anthony Edwards is amazing. It might be the next, son of Jordan, but he's hitting the wall too. Like things get progressively tougher in the playoffs for a reason. And things really tighten up, and you could see that happening with Haliburton. But for me, I leave this season very encouraged with what I saw, but also like there's a tinge of like, all right, man, like there's some things that made me slightly nervous, and I really am excited to see next year and see if it was all injury or if we've kind of hit a ceiling limiter here with him, and it's like maybe he's really good, but maybe he's not a consistently good player, or great, I should say. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we've talked about here. Like he needs a body transformation. Like he really does.
Yeah,
like
that's a great point.
He's got to put on weight and good weight, obviously, in terms of muscle.
Don't do Luka training. Don't go drink sweet tea with Luka. Yeah, it's working for him. Yeah,
he and Jokic do pretty well at coming into training camp,
fair.
just beer belly,
pudgy,
figure it out. Just start wearing the fat suit like James Harden did that one year he won it out of Houston.
Yeah.
That was amazing. But obviously, like, it's I think we talked about it with Dustin. It's like I'm not comparing Tyrese to MJ, but like MJ got beat up by the Pistons and then decided like, all right, I need to take the weight room really, really seriously, and then like was able to withstand some of that stuff, and like that transformed, the Bulls franchise. Obviously, it's Michael Jordan, he's the best player to ever play, but like he did have to go through that body transformation to reach his apex. And it's just something that Tyrese is going to have to do. Like the way that he plays is electric, but sometimes he when he's going up for layups, like he kind of gets scared and he'll like do that little like 360 deal where he's just looking for who he can pass to and stuff like that. Like when he can turn that into just like dunking on somebody, like that to me is where his ceiling raises. Because I do think like that in-season tournament run he went on was amazing, was a ton of fun, but he was as fresh as possible basically then. That's December basketball. You start talking about late May into June basketball, like that's when your body starts breaking down, and it's where you got to take all that stuff super seriously. Like you're playing 100 games, like you got to take your recovery, you got to take your weight training, you got to do all of that stuff to ensure that your body's right for when it needs to be right most.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, hopefully with that body transformation comes a bit more of a focus on defense, and maybe just having that strength could help with defense, because that's something this team needs. And you can't start, and we'll talk about this in I keep pushing it off, but we will talk about off-season thoughts. But I mean, this team needs to get better defensively, but that might mean having to get rid of some offense, or it means Tyrese has to get better defensively. Like you kind of like, or else he's going to start losing more and more of his offensive weapons to replace them with defensive stoppers. And that's going to have to be kind of the trade-off. It's like, all right, man, like if you're going to be this bad defensively, you're not going to have a lot of offensive help, or you got to get better defensively, and then we can give you all the offensive weapons you want.
And I think that's part of that strength transformation. But I mean, in games 1 and 2, when he was in, the Celtics were hunting his matchup, and what was happening was either he was switching on to somebody and they were just taking him straight to the hoop, and because he wasn't strong enough to keep him in front, or he would like do that hard hedge, and then the Pacers were just getting a horrible rotation, and somebody ended up wide open on the 3-point line. And so he has to get better to where he's not completely hunted on the defensive end. Like it's just such a vast array from his offensive capabilities. If he can become even an average defender, to me, that changes the game for the Pacers and like in what they're able to do defensively, because they're kind of constantly having to cover for his liabilities on that end.
Yep, totally agree. Looking at the season as a whole, I'm getting sick of this whole podcast is like us getting sick of the national narrative and how we're treated. This idea where it's almost like we are, St. Peter's or something. The Pacers are just this really plucky 16 story that, I mean, I'm listening to some pods where it's like, we'll just sit there and talk about the Celtics for 45 minutes and not even mention the Pacers. Like, I understand we're not winning. I understand we just got swept, but like we were in the conference finals. Like, can we talk about us for 5 minutes? And this idea when you hear people kind of look at the East for next year, it's like, I don't know, man. Like, the Cavs got to get it figured out. Like the Magic, they're a team on the rise. Like, okay, we have the same record as the Magic. Like, we still won 47 games last year. For all the like dick sucking the media did of the Knicks, like they only won 3 more games than we did. The Bucks only won 2 more games than we did. It's not like we eked our way into the play. I mean, if we did, so did everybody else that's not named the Celtics. Like, yeah, we won the same number of games as the 76ers, and everyone's talking about how they're like going to be a problem. And that's the part that I am frustrated with is as a season as a whole, this was a successful season. As you and I talked about, get one of the top 6 protected seeds. They did it. They did it by a razor thin margin, but they did it. And I'm tired of being treated as if like this is just some wild Cinderella run. This is a team that was right in that mix of all of those teams during the regular season. And to me, that was really important. I mean, you won 35 games the year before. 37.
You went from the 7th pick in the draft
to 47 wins. That's great. And then you had a lot of things break your way in the playoffs, but you won those series. You won a really tough series against a veteran, old, crafty team in the Bucks. You won a 7-game series against the Knicks. You showed that you could go into MSG with this crew and win in Game 7. Granted, the Knicks didn't have all their players, but who cares? And you had all of yours, but they all got that experience of what that is like. And then you also understood, all right, this is what the next level is when you're in the really elite high level. And this is the kind of stuff, if you're Nembhard, you've got to know, like, all right, next time I can't go up against Drew Holiday one-on-one, or I got to have a better move or something. So to me, it's very obvious, but this season is just, there's no question it ended on a bad note. But as a whole, man, this is about as good as you could possibly ask for this year with this team.
Yeah, what's interesting to me that is annoying is like the Timberwolves are about to get swept too, but like the narrative for them is just like, oh, Cat's in a shooting slump, or Anthony Edwards is wearing down. It's like the Pacers and the Timberwolves are in very similar situations. Young teams growing up right before our eyes,
right? And
both are getting kind of boat raced. Although the Timberwolves a little bit more so than like the Pacers didn't really get boat raced. They, down to the wire every game against the Celtics. But my point here is that like the national narratives for those two are vastly different. And I get it. Anthony Edwards is seemingly going to be the face of the league here in the next couple of years, probably. But the Pacers are a very, very young team that just grew up a ton and got a ton of valuable experience. And all the while, like, not completely healthy, like Haliburton was fighting things. He was questionable probably more than half the games in the playoffs. So, like, that's their best player. Definitely not 100% ever. Like, I don't think he was ever 100% the whole year after that injury. And I think it kind of that's showcased by like re-aggravating that hamstring. Like that thing obviously was not 100%, or you're not like re-aggravating it within the last few months. But nonetheless, like the Pacers are a very young team. They have a lot of financial flexibility that they've built themselves. They've got guys on good deals. Like they built it the right way. And yeah, the narrative of like, they lucked into where they were, like, screw that. Like,
yeah.
Like, I don't agree. Like, like my mentions yesterday were full of Knicks fans, like basking in the glory that the Pacers got swept because it validated that like they really weren't that good. And it's like, okay, have a heyday. 8 days after you guys got your asses beat at MSG, like, go for it. But yeah, I'm with you. The narrative on the Pacers, to me, from a national perspective versus where I sit with them, is vastly different, because I think this is a team that was young, inexperienced, got to grow up a lot, got a ton of valuable experience, and got that. Now they've got a little bit of hunger. Like they tasted this a little bit, right? So now it's like we got to get back here. What do we need to do to get back here, but also excel once we're there? And so I just am in a much different spot than where the national narrative is on these guys.
Agreed. Any other thoughts on the series of the season before we look off season?
I think Miles Turner gets a lot of hate, and like that dude had an awesome playoffs when you look at the big picture. 17 points, protected the rim, rebounded pretty well. 7 rebounds a game. Didn't, had a little bit of a turnover issue, but like to me, Miles Turner on the deal that the Pacers got him at is just like you can that is the apex of a $20 million guy is what Miles Turner is giving you. And so yes, last night he lost his damn mind for a while there where he just couldn't get it back. But to me, his playoff run was exactly what you need out of that guy. And this was his first experience tasting some of this. He's going to come back hungry. So I did just want to touch on I thought Miles as a whole in the playoffs was fantastic and exactly what the Pacers needed from him.
No, I agree. He's my son's favorite player. And I feel bad. I keep on forgetting him on this pod, but it's true. It's he is probably the third best player on this team. I always say Mathurin, but he is, and he's pretty reliable. I mean, he's a little bit streaky on his shooting. Sometimes it can kind of go hot and cold, as a lot of shooters can. But he is. This is probably the apex of where Miles Turner is playing right now. And he did lose his mind. I don't mind that edge a little bit. You need somebody with Mathurin gone, you need somebody on this team to kind of have a bit of that edge. And so I'm fine with it. As we look to the offseason, so we're going to come back to the Nembhard thing that you brought up. I think it's a very fascinating subplot that's going to go on this offseason is that let's just assume they're re-signing Siakam just to make this argument easier, because I think you and I would both say that's a 95% chance it's going to happen. If you re-sign Siakam, here are all the players that you have under contract and just are under contract for next year. Siakam, Turner, McConnell, Mathurin, Jarris Walker, who I don't know if you know, Tony, he was a draft pick we had this year in the lottery.
Is he on the team?
Yeah, he's a actual player who gets paid by the Pacers, not the G League. Walker, Tyrese Haliburton, Nesmith, Isaiah Jackson, Shepard, Nembhard, Kendall Brown. Jalen Smith has a $5.4 million player option. I honestly don't know what he does with that. So that's a to be determined. If he takes that, it's coming back. My point being is that, for all of this talk of, I'm going to ask you, what does this team need to do in the offseason to get better? Maybe not a player, but things they need to do. I want to hear your answer, but they're in an interesting spot where you're basically bringing the entire team back. This is like a team with no seniors. The only one that I didn't mention is Doug McDermott, who's gone. Them re-signing him at $13.5 million is just not going to happen. If that happens, everyone needs to be fired immediately. That's not going to happen. Obi Toppin is a restricted free agent. He's making 6.8 this year. I really hope they bring him back. But if you bring, this is the odd thing. If you bring back Toppin and you sign Siakam, it's you still have money to sign, but it's where are they going to play? You have your entire team back. So I think that's an interesting subplot, but I would ask you, what do you think this team needs in this offseason to get better?
Yeah, I think some of it is just some of that offensive cohesion and figuring out what you can do with Siakam. And I know that sounds goofy, offensive cohesion. They were, second best in the playoffs in terms of offensive efficiency. But as we've noted, sometimes it gets a little clunky with Siakam and stuff. So I think that's one thing is just figuring out how you can play around Siakam with Tyrese Haliburton. I think figuring out your team defense and what you can do differently to either mask some of your deficiencies or, just guard better. In all honesty, if they're even an average defensive team, they become really good.
Yeah.
Really, really good. So you got to figure out some defensive things. And then from there, it's just finish, there were some times this season where I think they really, some of their immaturity showed, not as much in the playoffs, although they did have some stinkers in the playoffs, but I can remember some Bulls games this year. It's like
Yeah.
you got to beat the Bulls.
Yeah.
You know,
a
you can't
Raptors
go
game
into some
sits
of
in
these.
there too. Like just a lot of these games,
Exactly.
it's like, dude, you got to win this.
So like, because they would get up, like they'd play the Mavericks, beat the Mavericks, on the road, or play the Lakers, beat the Lakers, like whatever it was like they could get up for these big
Yeah.
games, but then sometimes like it's a Tuesday night and you're on the road in Chicago, and it's like they didn't seem like they wanted to be out there. So I think some of that consistency night to night is also necessary to like make that leap into maybe the top 2 or 3 seeds in the East. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, like you said, like you got the whole team back.
So let's get into Nembhard, because I was thinking about him this morning. He's an interesting character, because I think, as you and I both said, he turned into a bit of a dude. Like you have to remember, Andrew Nembhard he's 24 years old, but he's a second-round draft pick. He did not look. It's only his second season in the league. He did not look scared at all. I mean, he's going in with like hard drop steps against Jaylen Brown in the lane. I mean, he was going up against the Bucks and just completely, Patrick Beverley was doing all of his stuff and didn't seem fazed by it one bit. But he's a really interesting character because he is on a phenomenal contract. Next year, he's at $2 million. The year after, he's on a $2.1 million team extension. I mean, you're getting a starting guard in the Eastern Conference Finals for $2 million. That's how you have a great team. But to me, he's kind of the key of this. Sorry, not the key of the whole offseason. But he's a real key because you saw how well he played when Haliburton was out. Very small sample size, but he was a point guard at Gonzaga. He maybe is not best suited to be off the ball. And then it's like, all right, well, then you could just have him lead your second unit would kind of be the normal answer. It's like, well, but you have that in T.J. McConnell, who's just fantastic at doing that. Maybe you move TJ and just have Nembhard run the offense, but he runs it differently. TJ runs it in a very, as we've mentioned many times in this pod, TJ runs this on a very Haliburton-like tempo. Nembhard doesn't. I don't know. And maybe you look at Nembhard as like he's a trade piece because maybe this is as high as he's going to get. I hate to say it, but it's like this is a great run, and this is a lot of times this is when other teams make mistakes signing guys after small sample sizes, and he's got a great contract. Maybe you do trade him away for some pieces. I don't know. I'm curious what your thoughts on are because I'm not sure he's best suited. I'm not sure there's a lineup spot that best suits him with this team, but it's also like maybe you do have maybe you keep him and then you move McConnell. I don't know. There's a lot of options to go here.
Yeah, it's a conundrum for the front office because you've got 3 really good dudes that can run an offense in Haliburton, Nembhard, and McConnell. Obviously, you're not doing anything with Haliburton because he's the face of your franchise. So you got to decide. Like, I do think the way the Pacers play, it lends itself a bit more to maybe giving the reins to Nembhard a little bit more, even with Haliburton out there and letting Haliburton be off the ball. They push the ball and run kind of like the 2-sided break where it's like, if you can push ahead to a guard, you're going to push ahead to a guard. Doesn't matter if it's Haliburton or Nembhard. I think he's a really good defender too. Like he was getting cooked a little bit by Brunson, but Brunson was on an otherworldly tear. It's like I would hate to move off of Nembhard, especially with, like you said, he's making $2 million the next 2 seasons. So even trying to like salary match on that would be difficult for the Pacers too, from a trade perspective. Yeah, man, it's tough because it's like.
But if you
also
keep him,
you
like,
also have
world
Mathurin in the fold too. Like, do you want to get Mathurin into the starting lineup at some point, or do you keep him off the bench? Because if you're going to move Mathurin into the starting lineup, that probably moves Nembhard back to the bench. But then, like you said, you've got McConnell out there too. He's got another year on his deal.
Yeah, so he's at 9.3, which is not fully guaranteed. There's some options there. There's a world where, it's tough because I think McConnell has the heart of this city and is just the team and the city loves him. Take that out of it. That said, he'll be 33 next year. Like I don't see it. I think this is the apex of what you're going to see for McConnell to provide, and maybe he becomes more expensive than what he can offer at $9 million. And maybe you look to move him and you give the reins to Nembhard, who's younger and is a much better deal. Like, looking at it logically, that's probably the better move. It's just that's not going to be a fan favorite move.
Yeah, that'd be tough, man. Yeah, because like you said, it's just like, damn.
Well, this is the tough thing about having runs, like having playoff runs. You get in love with these guys, but you can't. I don't know if the Pacers can't run this back, because also, like, as much as we get pissed at the national narrative, like, there is the real narrative of, you saw it against the Celtics. We're undermanned. If we're gonna, I think we can beat a lot of the teams in the East. I don't think we can win the East with this team as it's currently constructed. And so just bringing everybody back a year older, I'm not sure it's just, they're going to get stronger and better defense. You probably need some different pieces.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that, I guess that would be where I would have to, where I can make my decisions. It's like, what are you getting in return? I guess.
Yeah.
Would help me. And I think, talk to me like mid-June, and when I'm not like fresh off of this, watching Nembhard go for 32 and 24 within the last 48 hours. And, McConnell, like you said, kind of having the heart of the city. Like, I could probably come at it with a more rational head here in a couple weeks, where I'm like, all right, yeah, like I want to win. And like, realistically, like you said, just running things back, like, you were the 6th seed. You did have some things fall your way to get that Eastern Conference Finals. I think that's the beauty of having Pritchard as the GM too. Is like, I don't think that he's gonna just roll with the status quo. Like, he's given himself a lot of flexibility to be able to do things, and now at this point, we got some decisions to make. But like, that's why he's paid the big bucks. Like, these are the things that he does. But like, I think they could have very easily run with the status quo. They made the in-season tournament final, and they could have just ran with that group with Bruce Brown and Buddy Hield and those guys through the end of the season. But like, he wanted to shake things up to improve the roster. So that Siakam move, to me, was kind of eye-opening in the sense of like, Pritchard understands that this roster isn't in its finality to be able to make a run. So it's like, he's got some irons in the fire as well.
And, the thing we've joked about a lot, but it's like, you have Jarris Walker just sitting there. Like, he was the 7th pick in the draft, which doesn't mean anything. I mean, Anthony Bennett was the number 1 pick, and 3 years later was like playing in China. I mean, and is out of the league. So just because you're a high pick doesn't really mean anything at this point, but there's talent there. I mean, he's crushing the G League.
Perform in the G League.
Which, again, it means something, but it also doesn't mean anything. There's a lot of guys who crush in the G League. I mean, Lance Stephenson's had some great G League performances, and I wouldn't want him starting for this team right now. But he's going to have to take some minutes next year. I mean, like, no question, you can't have another year from Walker like you had this year, or else like then it becomes a disaster. So he's got to take some minutes. It's going to come from somewhere, whether it's Jalen Smith or Isaiah Jackson or Shepherd. 2 of the 3 of those looked really good in this playoff run. Like, Shepherd looked really good. He got a little bit deer in headlightsy at the very end and couldn't hit a 3 in the Eastern Conference Finals. He can still play defense. He still brought a lot more than I was expecting. If you told me at the beginning of the year Shepherd starting a playoff game, I'm like, all right, that's not awesome. Yeah. But it's like, I got to a point like, all right, I could see that. And Isaiah Jackson, dude, when he came in, he brought something. I mean, he really did. And he's on a great deal. He's $4 million next year, and he's between Smith, Jackson, Shepherd, Nembhard, you have a lot of guys who've shown they can provide something in the playoffs at a price that's very, very, very attractive for a trade piece. Unlike we're seeing in the West with Karl Anthony Towns, who's not doing much, but he's making $48 million a year. Like, those are the tough ones there to move. So I think the Pacers have a lot of interesting pieces to move here, and I think they're going to have to do something, because I just don't think there's enough time in the game to give out to all of these players. I mean, I always joke on Crimson Cast about IU. It's like, we're always like, at this point, like, oh my God, how are we going to play any of these guys minutes? But you have real examples here of like, all right, your starting lineup is Haliburton. I'm assuming still Nesmith, Siakam, Turner, and like maybe Nembhard. If we put him to the bench, then maybe Mathurin, but then you got to have minutes for Walker and, Shepherd, if you keep him, and, Jalen Smith and Jackson are going to need some minutes. Like, and if you re-sign a guy like Toppin, and then if you get anybody else, they're going to have some minutes. I just named 11 guys, and teams don't run that deep. So there's going to have to be some trade-offs here.
Yeah, and also, like, considering, too, like,
McConnell,
your
they mentioned
culture
McConnell.
in those things too. Like, you don't want guys getting frustrated as well because they're not playing the role that they want. And I think Rick Carlisle's done this enough to where he can massage those things a lot. And I mean, hell, McConnell was a DNP coach's decision for several games this season during a stretch.
Yep.
So it's like you've got, I think you've got a good coach in terms of like managing those things. But like when you start having 12, 13 guys that think they should be playing 20 minutes a night and only 8 of them are doing that, like you're going to start having, I think, some folks that are just a little bit aggravated at what their role is. And then that could seep into, your locker room culture, and that can be a killer as well. So you want to make sure not saying you want to just trade guys away because you don't want to piss them off, but you also like culture and team cohesion, and that like is a big factor in your success.
The thing the Pacers have going for them is if Haliburton is the dude, even if he's a little bit inconsistency, if he has those high level flashes and can kind of even it out a little bit, you have him on his first max contract, which is still a very reasonable price of, 35, 38, 40, $43 million. Go look at Giannis's contract and Dame Lillard's contract and some of those other second max deals. I mean, unfortunately, look at Siakam's when we get him. It's going to be big. It's going to be a big number. Those get scary. Those get big and frightening. Haliburton, and you're also kind of in this great spot where you have him on an early deal. It's not that bad. I should rephrase. We're going to be adding $40 million to this, so there's going to be those numbers are going to go up by a little bit because he made All NBA, which we didn't talk about yet, which is awesome for Haliburton. But also, like, you're hitting this right when the TV deal is going to be announced. I think this offseason they're going to be raising the cap probably 10% a year every single year. So I think these numbers are going to get even better for us. It'll get better for everybody, but it's going to be even better for teams that are kind of near the bottom. So, I mean, the Pacers are in a really, really good spot. The last guy I want to ask about, and then I have one last question for you, is just, Turner. It's Turner, the guy we seem to always forget. He's 28 years old, but next year he's going into the final year of his contract, 19.9, so basically $20 million a year. He's an interesting person because it feels like we do have a couple of guys who are kind of apex where they're at. McConnell, Turner, like I think Turner could slightly get a little bit better, but I think this is pretty close to what we're going to get Turner-wise. He's a great piece for this team. As I've said before, it feels like he's understood the two-man game with Haliburton about as good as anybody else since Buddy Hield left. But also, that's a really valuable trade piece at that salary cap. You can get a lot of stuff back there. I think a lot of teams would have interest in that. But I also think keeping him here is good if you can keep him in that kind of salary range. But it's, that's kind of that, you could keep Turner and a bunch of these smaller pieces, or it's like, he's a piece that if you take him and package him with Nembhard, Jackson, and Shepard or Walker, I mean, now the numbers work out where you could get a third max guy. And is that more valuable than having Turner and a couple other pieces? I don't know, but it's like I'm very curious to see what happens with Turner because I think he's a key that might unlock a lot of this.
Yeah, I mean, talent wins, right? Like, look at what we're going to see in the NBA Finals more than likely. I mean, unless the Timberwolves go on this, otherworldly run that has never happened in NBA history. It's going to be Luka, Kyrie, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. Like they're all dogs and max level players, and so talent wins. So if you can package a couple guys, especially when we're talking about like, hey, is everybody gonna be happy with their role here? And you could turn that into a third guy that can go get a bucket that fits in. Like that's the biggest part is like you don't want to just go get like a Trae Young, or something like that, where it's like a guy that doesn't fit in with anything that you're wanting to do offensively or defensively. But I mean, if you can go get a wing, like a two-way wing, I don't know, like a Paul George, that can defend another team's best player, but still on the offensive end can go get you a bucket. Like, I'd be hard pressed to say don't do that to keep things status quo here. Like
or get a Drew Holiday type. I mean, again, it's not a perfect fit, but just somebody like that where it's like he provides offense when needed, but is just an absolute dog defensively.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that's what moves the needle forward, right? We
Yeah.
talked about like the defense has to get better. Like you could try to do that as a team, like getting better in the offseason, or you can just go get a dude that's going to get stops.
Yeah. I look at the Celtics like, dude, how can they get so many players, so many
I
guys
know.
on big
It's
deals?
wild.
It's unfair. But this is where the second apron's coming in. I think July 1. They start adding this. Like, so this is going to start changing. I'll ask you this, Tony, to kind of get near the end. You're a little better on like who's available, other players out there. Like if you had to put some targets out there on your wish list, let's not figure out who we're getting rid of, but like who would you like to pick up specifically that's available or you think would be available out there on the market for the Pacers next year?
Yeah, I mean, the two guys that you could make realistic cases for, one of which we've talked about before. I think actually we talked about both. I mean, Paul George and OG Anunoby both would kind of fit that long wing. That's a good defender and can go get you a bucket as well. That are also possibly available.
And I will
offseason.
interrupt for a sec. When we talked about Paul George last time, near the middle of the end of the season, we laid out a playoff scenario that kind of exactly played out, where it's like, the worst case would have been the Clippers making a run. The best case was them kind of shitting out, which they did. And the best case was the Pacers showing that they had a lot of promise, but needed that extra piece, which they did, versus like the worst case for the Pacers was like getting the 7th seed and losing in the play-in. This turned out the perfect scenario if you wanted to court Paul George. It does sound like the Sixers are going to be out that side too. And it's like, this is where the Pacers, like, they might have to go into some taxman. But anyway, sorry to interrupt. It's just like, it's funny. This played out exactly what we talked about for a Paul George scenario.
Yeah, and so there's, in terms of like bigger names, there's not a ton like this offseason that are. I mean, you're gonna have like your James Harden and guys like that are kind of over the hill, or like I'm not going to get James Harden or Gordon Hayward this offseason if I'm the Pacers. Those aren't guys that I'm targeting. Outside of that, you don't really have a ton that are really available that I think could move the needle for the Pacers. Like Tyrese Maxey is a restricted free agent. Like, yeah, he'd be great to go get, but he's obviously going to remain a Sixer no matter what.
Yeah.
So it's like, in terms of unrestricted free agents, there's not a ton of guys that I think really can change the game for the Pacers, or somebody that you could get on like a sign and trade or something like that would make things better. But to me, like the two that you could possibly make a case for would be Paul George and OG Anunoby.
Okay. I like OG. Just like bringing back the entire Raptors team here.
Yeah, which makes me have questions about the Raptors this season. Cause
yeah, no kidding.
Because those dudes are both like showed out this postseason for their respective teams, and the one thing we talk about with OG is like he definitely has some health concerns, and he's gonna warrant probably $40 million.
Yeah.
So that would be a tough pill to swallow, but
like I'm looking at like, it's not perfect, but looking at like all NBA defensive teams and like the players that are available on there. It's like, again, the Celtics just kind of grabbed Drew Holiday in this weird mix that happened. But like, could the Pacers go out and get like an Alex Caruso? I mean, he's making $9.5 million. He's right in that T.J. McConnell price range. Like, and again, love T.J. McConnell, everything he's been doing. Maybe this goes back to that Nembhard discussion of like, all right, you hand the keys over to Nembhard. Again, I don't know if how it's possible. Like, that's that opening where it's like you go get a guy like Alex Caruso who can play a little offense but can really bring the defense, and you give up McConnell for it. And it's like, all right, Nembhard, you are going to be our second unit guy, but you're also going to come in and run some first unit stuff with Haliburton. Like, maybe that's how you look at it. I also think this is where Obi comes in, where, Obi to me is kind of a discussion you have with Haliburton. It's like, all right, man, like Obi's a restricted free agent, so we could match anything that it's offered for him. I think it comes a price where it's like over $10 million. It's like, all right, we can't afford to pay Obi. But I think this is a discussion with Haliburton. It's like, all right, man, like Obi's the toy you want to have on offense. Like, you've got to be better defensively or else you don't get Obi, because Obi's great, but Obi's kind of not great defensively. He's kind of highlighty, but not great defensively, makes mental lapses a lot. You can handle it if everyone else is better defensively. So I think Obi's going to be kind of a question for, if I'm Pritchard, I'm like, it becomes a question for Haliburton. It's like, all right, man, like if you can step it up defensively and you can get to become a, B- defender, you can have your offensive toys. If you can't, then we're going to have to move that $6 million and go get a Alex Caruso type or somebody like that, because we need to help defensively.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, it's just
I'm looking at the rest of the All NBA defensive
team,
team, and there's none of those guys are getting moved. Like maybe Herb Jones, but I don't think the Pelicans would move him. But it's like Wembanyama, Davis, Bam Adebayo, Rudy Gobert. Those guys are not being moved. And then second team was Drew Holiday, Jaden McDaniels, Jalen Suggs, Derek White, and Alex Caruso. I think Caruso's the only one on there you could probably snag.
Yeah, I'm looking at Hoops Hype has their free agents listed. They've got Tyrese Maxey's number 1 this offseason. Paul George is number 2. LeBron James is number 3. Siakam's 4. Anunoby's 5. And then to round out the top 10, they've got Harden, DeRozan, Miles Bridges, Malik Monk, and Tobias Harris.
Yeah, and Tobias would be a nightmare. Like you just...
Yeah, I don't want that. And then I think Malik Monk could be intriguing. Miles Bridges, prior to him being a complete asshole, might have been a decent decent run at him, but I don't know that the Pacers are going to want to bring that into their locker room.
Yeah, I mean the OG thing is interesting, as is the Paul George thing, but again, this goes into, and I just don't know if we have the answers. I mean, you mentioned on Twitter a lot that, is this a new paradigm of team building where you have a lot of these, really good role players on good contracts like the Pacers have, where you have a Nembhard who can get you 25 in a playoff game, but he's making $2 million. That's attractive. But there's also, like, when you get down to it, the teams that are going to be in the finals aren't those teams. Like, the teams in the finals are the teams like the Celtics and probably the Mavs that have the ultra superstars on that level. And so it's like, what is the answer here? And are we seeing a paradigm shift, or is this just a couple of teams that had good runs and the norm for the NBA is still there? Because if you go and get a Paul George or an OG with Siakam, with Haliburton, I mean, I'm looking at the numbers. You're either deep into the tax, which the Pacers aren't normally going to do. You're going to you don't want to get in those aprons. You're getting rid of McConnell, Mathurin, Nesmith, and Turner. Like, I'm just picking names. Like, that's $40 million right there. Like, all those guys that I mentioned would have to go for you to go and get OG or Paul George, because you can't have 3 max guys and then also be paying a bunch of guys $20 million.
Yeah, and it certainly goes against what Pritchard has done to date. Now, maybe he's been setting up for this. Like, I've remained with this financial flexibility so that I could set our team up to make a run here. But it would be very outside of what he's done to date, for sure, to kind of hamstring the roster financially like this. It would also just go against, what the Pacers have done historically, like you said, getting into the tax.
Yeah. And I just
now,
don't
Simon has said he would, but it's got to be on a contender to go into the tax.
Yeah, I just don't see Paul George or OG as the answers. Nothing against them. I think they're both good players. I think Paul George is a little bit older than we want and not maybe as good of a defender as he used to be, and that's what you need. And I think OG is a fantastic defender. I just don't trust he can stay healthy. And I would be frightened of giving him that kind of money, because when you give somebody that much money, being available is a huge part to it. Unless they are like Embiid level, you're top 4 in the NBA good, and when you're going to give us a chance to win a title, which I love. I like a lot of OG's game. He's not that. Like, at his absolute apex, he's not one of the top 10 players in the league. I mean, it's no knock, it just isn't. So
right,
him as a max slot is frightening when he's not healthy. So I don't think
the other intriguing thing is that the Pacers did try to get him in right before the trade deadline this year. Like, they were in the finals with the Knicks. So that is an interesting aspect, is like they did see some value in what he brought, and probably knew they were going to have to pay him big money if they did secure him. So that part of it is interesting to me as well, is like they made a run at him before. not that long ago.
I heard they were trying to get both of them. Like they were going for Siakam and OG. Like just get both of them.
And you keep seeing those pictures of OG and Tyrese whispering in each other's ears back and forth. So it's probably, I don't want to say it's a pipe dream because it also scares the crap out of me if they do it. But it's an interesting conversation and a interesting way to look at it. It does instantly improve your defense, like immediately if he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, because you would then have a starting lineup of Haliburton, Nesmith, OG, Pascal, and Miles. That's pretty good. And then
That's a lot of length.
That's a lot of length. And then you have, some dudes in the bench who can run it. You have Nembhard and McConnell. I keep going back to, man, I don't think McConnell and Nembhard, you're just going to have to figure something out. It's just not enough playing time there. and anyway. All right, man, let's wrap up here. We're at an hour. Appreciate everybody from listening. We did a lot during the playoffs because there was a lot to talk about. I think we're going to, some thoughts on this podcast moving forward. As always, if you have questions or comments, just reach out to us, RightUpMeridian@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. If you have ideas on things we should talk about in the offseason, would love some ideas. I think, we're going to take some more time. We'll probably get Dustin back on, do a recap with him, kind of recap some things. But I think we'll probably move a little bit more to, during the season, we try and keep a weekly schedule is kind of what we try and do. Tony and I like to look at things, a little bit granular here and there, but really kind of do a little bit of a higher level look at things. Free agency talk, the contract stuff, how it all fits in, how the trends of the team. I think in this offseason, we'll probably go maybe every other week. So it might be a little bit of time between podcasters. Isn't as much to talk about. We'll do a little bit more as we get into the draft. Do we have a second round pick this year? I know we traded away both our firsts. Do we have a second or do we have nothing in the draft this year?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
I don't even know where to go. Like, where do you? This is awful. I don't even know where to search. Like, what draft picks we have and don't have. Like, I don't know a good site for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe we need to start one.
yeah.
Who has this?
You did the portal. The portal. I'm sure there is one. If anything else,
Fanspo's got them. We have
round?
2 second rounders, 3 second rounders this year.
Okay.
We have Milwaukee second rounder, Chicago or Pelicans second rounder, the worst of that, and then so
Pelicans. A lot of mid second round.
And then Toronto, Cleveland, or Utah second rounder.
Okay, so we'll probably end up trading it for nothing or money or draft a guy that Carlisle is going to play. Awesome. But so not a ton of draft talk, but then we will, so we have about a month between now and free agency starts July 1st, I believe. So I mean, it'll get hot and heavy. Then we'll do a couple pods before then, after then. But there will be some hiatuses during the summer as we all kind of regroup, and then we will look to hit it hard as we get back into September, October, and then try and keep a weekly or every 10 to 12 days or so during the regular season. So that's kind of if you don't hear from us for a while in the summer, we're not going anywhere. We're just taking some time off. And Tony and I both also do a lot of IU basketball content here on the Back Home Network. So, this is kind of our time to recharge, unplug, and get out of it. And so we've been hot and heavy. And while it's been a fun playoff run, I'm also I'm a bit exhausted, just tired of just, it's like, there's a part where it's like, I'm sad it's over, but also it's going to be nice to just not have to freak out every other night.
Yeah, I know those every other night, like just high anxiety is a lot. But yeah, like you said, just to echo some of what you said, we really got in a good cadence here with this podcast, the back half of the season, and super excited about the future of the podcast. If you like it, tell your friends. Give us a 5-star review if you wouldn't mind on whatever platform you're listening to. That helps kind of get the word out as well. Really, really exciting playoff run. One other thing too, NBA lost a legend in Bill Walton yesterday. So rest in peace to him. That dude just was certainly a polarizing figure in some aspects of like his commentary, but like an absolute, maybe the best college basketball player ever and an NBA legend. And gone too soon. So it was sad to see that yesterday.
Agreed on all that. The 30 for 30 they just released, like a year ago, they released on. It was like a 4-parter. It was really interesting. And I've always liked Walton. I mean, I know he's polarizing on his broadcast, but to me, it's like the guy loves basketball. He loves having fun. He's quirky, but I think we need more of that. And it's like no matter what, you had a take on Bill Walton versus some of the current NBA announcers and color guys. Just like, all right, it is what it is. Which I'm not knocking them, but I'm with you. I always enjoyed Walton. He always had interesting things to say. He was very much like a Charles Barkley type. Was very much a one of one, and he's a career where, damn man, that's a weird career that could have gone. You replay that career 20 times. There's probably 18 times where he has a better career. And this is a guy who won a title, won an MVP, or won 2 titles, won a 6-man, won an MVP. And it feels like they left a lot on the table with just injuries. And then, even I didn't fully get it until I read a couple books and then also watched the docs that, that whole scenario where he went to San Diego and then kind of didn't play. And then like, it was a weird, he almost like had like a 3-year hiatus, just didn't play basketball, and was kind of left out and was really going through like contract battles and just weird shit. And then just goes to Boston, like becomes like the perfect 6-man. But here's the thing, Tony, with that older stuff, it boggles my mind when how much happened in such a short period of time back then. That Walton won the 79 finals or 79 finals. He's MVP. And then by 84, 85, he's a 6-man with Boston. I mean, it's like 2019. That's like, Kawhi won the title. These are not perfect comps, but it's like Kawhi won the title with the Raptors in 2019. It would be like him just being a 6-man on a team right now. It's like, that's banana. And Kawhi's older than even Walton was. I mean, that would be like in 3 years, Anthony Edwards just becoming like a 6-man for a team. Like, it's just so much happened in such a short period of time where it's like, we're still talking about Tatum. It's like, he's been with the Celtics for 7 years. I don't know. It's that I look back at that stuff. Like that's wild.
Yeah, that is nuts. I think it probably speaks to just like how much there's been advancements in like taking care of your body and stuff like that too. Of like these guys' career longevity is much more vast than it probably used to be.
Yeah. No, and he won the MVP and only played like 46 games or something. I mean, he only really had a stretch where he was healthy at peak Walton in the NBA for like 70 games. Like it was. Yeah,
I was gonna say it wasn't much.
It was the back half of that year they won the title, and then like the first 30 games of the next season he got injured, and it's just done. And then he just is never again a contending player. But then goes the Celtics, and there's just so many stories about Bird and McHale and Walton just jacking it up and joking around, and like them still making fun of Walton the way he talks. And I mean, you're right, man. Just an absolute true one of one. And yeah, it's sad that he's not around. So
absolutely
good memory. All right, Tony, thank you as always. Thank you everybody out there for listening. And that's it, man. That's the end of the 2023-2024 season, but it's a sad ending. But I think there are better times ahead. And we look forward to doing them with you right here on the Right Up Meridian podcast. And for this same podcast, this is Scott signing off.